we move on with our next track that is called Raise Your Product. And for that, I'm very pleased to welcome two guys here on stage. Our topic captain who curated this track for us, Sebastian, he's the founder of 9 Elements. And with him, he brought Irai, who is the co-founder of Imagely. So welcome on stage. So I made some room for you guys. You get comfortable. I hope you feel comfortable in this setup.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
Sebastian, you call yourself head of nerds.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I'm really excited what they built up in this topic track. And with that, I'll leave this all up to you. Oh, this is for you.
This is for me.
Yeah, your questions come in here.
Okay, great.
Actually, this is mine now.
Let's start. Maybe we should introduce ourselves, yes?
Maybe I should just figure out how to go to the first slide, please. I'm tapping the green button.
Okay. Our talk will be about how to grow your product. It's like this is something when you start a startup, you have a basic idea. You bring it to the streets, you have your first customers, but how do you continue? This is what it will be about. And please continue.
Yeah, actually, Sebastian came to me and said, let's have this talk together. And when he said the topic is how to grow your own product, it was more like, okay, cool. Let's talk about growing your own product.
Yeah.
But as you can see, it was not about it. More than that, it's about maybe the experience that both of us gained through building 2 companies and co-founding several other startups. Just to kind of recircle back to who we are. So I'm co-founder of Imagely, which is actually a 9 Elements spin-off. Let's not make things too complicated for now. So Imagely is actually we're building the creative engine of the digital world. And basically it means that we're empowering developers with development kits to quickly build creative tools, workflows, and automations. And we came from the 9 Elements family, and maybe you just
it's like I met Irai 20 years ago, and we co-founded 9 Elements, which is a software development studio, which is pretty boring. But we got into the whole startup community like 10 or 12 years ago, did our first investments. We both shared the experience with over 150 startups that we either had as clients or actually invested in. Yeah.
All right. So let's move on and just share some insights, experience, and common wisdom maybe that we encountered during our several ventures. And we have 3 different topics we want to talk about. When you talk about growing your products, it's always about the humble beginnings. Then there's 2 things. One is vertical expansion, which is basically how to grow your product more in depth, like adding new features, etc. And the horizontal expansion, that means more like growing, starting to add new products into your product line. So we will touch every of these single points, and maybe let's start with the humble beginnings. So really one important insight is that your product actually doesn't really start with the code, so don't wait until someone starts building it. Actually, it starts with the very moment where you have something tangible, and I think you have cool experience with that.
Yeah, it's like when we started mein Praktikum, there were 2 guys who revolutionized the job market before LinkedIn, Xing, and Monster. They actually came to us, we made a workshop with them, defined the product, and then they actually print out the screens that we have developed and made it really nice and went to the first clients and showed them, this is the product we're going to build. And if it's going to be there, would you be our first clients? And they actually did half the money they actually needed for the development, they did it in pre-sales, and the rest of the money they intended to borrow from the bank. And this is where we said, don't borrow from the bank, maybe we should give you the money and be your co-investors. And this is something that really flipped my mind, because in the early 9 Elements days, like I am a developer, you're a developer, you're also a designer, and developers develop and designers are designing. This is what we're good at, and so we do it a lot. But we don't do pre-sales because we are no salesman. And this is something I can encourage everyone to, that you maybe don't develop and don't design, but like define what your product is and try to sell first.
Yeah. I mean, by no means, it does not really mean that you have a product market fit when you just make some pre-sales, but it's just a great beginning, great start to, go with this. Just a second. All right, let's get to the next point, which is something that we have encountered a couple of times. So with Imagely, we started with a photo editor SDK. So it's like a photo editor that every customer can integrate into their own application, into their own service. So one thing that happens when your product is still very much in the beginning is there's like multiple things that are missing. So customers come to you and say, potentially I would love to use your product, but you need to add this and that, and can we kind of make a deal together? So it means that you're shifting the nature of your business back kind of to a service model, because now you're charging for just adding something to your product rather than having like recurring revenue. So we were thinking, my team was thinking a lot about this approach. So it has positive sides, it has negative sides. Negative is, of course, that you're diluting your focus and your customer more or less predicts, your roadmap, or the roadmap is kind of shaped through, these type of deals that you have, like deadlines, and this feels more like you're working back in an agency. But one advantage that we saw was, hey, they really want to have mostly features that make a lot of sense and that we also feel like should be part in our roadmap. So again, it can be part of your early validation, but the most important part is that you find yourself the way out of this mode, because in the end, as you grow, this is not something that you want to drag along with you for a long time. For the beginning, it's definitely something that works, and I can always recommend to consider it and not to be too strict about it, as long as you find your way out. Yeah, maybe we go to the next step. Let's talk about like the vertical expansion, which means, okay, you're adding new features to your app, and this is kind of magic. When, what feature, how do you determine these things, and what are the pitfalls? And let's look into the important things. So one important insight is, in my opinion, you should identify your traction channel early on, very, very early on. You should be very diligent with it and very structured with it. There's like multiple ways, to look into this. So first of all, there is this common observation that 70–80% of the most successful, startups, their revenue comes from one traction channel. So you have to focus actually on one channel to find that one channel that will actually define your business later on, instead of just looking everywhere and just diluting and not really understanding how you can scale later on. So there's multiple ways in doing that. There is one framework, which is called Bullseye Framework, which basically says that you're looking in a more structured way by defining inner circle, outer circle, mapping different potential channels into these circles, and then starting to really validate every traction channel. Why is that important for your product? I mean, this is marketing, but it really plays into your product in a big time. So, for example, with us, our main traction channel is actually SEO, and to be a little bit more precise, it's the developer experience shaped through our documentation. Developers search for specific keywords. How can I build filters with JavaScript? And that is the way they find us, and then they will land on the documentation. And that's why our documentation is an essential part to our product. In the beginning, it was not that clear. I mean, in the beginning, we were focusing on the editor itself, which was considered our core product. But right now, it's more like everything together. The documentation is a centerpiece, and that's the main part that is kind of responsible for our traction. Yeah, and maybe like one thing that is also very common is don't ask your customers for solutions. So we interact a lot with different customers. And there's two things that can happen. One is that your customer just tell about the problem, which is great. So you listen and then you put your own brain onto it, look into the market, look into competition. How can you solve this? But sometimes customers come and they are like, I want to have this and that. And we all know that this is not going to work great. So one other thing that is sometimes quickly overlooked is that you really have to keep your features organized. There's tools for that, like product board. Start early on with that. This is your product hygiene, so you can really look into your roadmap, understand how you're aligned with your stakeholders, and not have like this chaotic, okay, we can add this feature now, I feel like it, or our KPIs indicate this, but don't jump too early if you're not considering every other feature that is in your kind of roadmap, in your scope.
One thing I would like to add is don't aim for the low-hanging fruits. This is also something that people just come with things that look really simple, and you can say, if I add that, it won't take much time. But also consider the time that you have to add if you're gonna maintain a feature or improve a feature. This complexity grows exponentially over time.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this is, so Sebastian is our feature killer. Maybe I'll leave this for him.
Yeah, kill your features early. I think most of the people are builders here. And this is why they always think of adding features or discovering new market opportunities. For example, there's a new mobile phone coming out, it has a new feature. Maybe we can leverage that for our product. And it's going to get built. You have to look for product market fit. But the last step of removing features is often overlooked. It hasn't been done. We have experienced that when we have built mein Praktikum, Ausbildung, and from there on we expanded a lot into different directions and kept adding features without ever removing them. And this has been because, like what I've said earlier, we were developers and designers and builders, and we liked building stuff. So we built stuff, and we were not so good at maintaining stuff. We didn't like that, and so we kept somewhat out the part of removing features, and it creates headspace that you regain if you do it, and you can if you have the feeling that some of the features are slowing your pace at development, you can get this from internal KPIs. You could track how many regressions you have if you're going to ship a feature. You can track the time, how long do you take to ship a feature, and you want to reduce that times. And then you can also look at, for example, for external things. You build something, you build a feature, and then you test out whether it's accepted and are people really paying for it. And killing a feature is always super difficult because there will be always that one customer who said don't kill the feature, I'm using it all the fucking time, and please don't do it. Or you will have a team member, maybe a senior developer, who is really attached because it was technically something that he poured a lot of his sweat inside, and if you kill the feature, he's going to be personally pissed. And you have to take care of explain all the time why you're going to remove the feature because it's not contributing to the value. Yeah, I can just recommend, we have done this badly in the past. We become good at it right now, and just do it.
Yeah, maybe from your experience, how justified is the angst of killing it, in terms of users being super pissed or your own team being super pissed? So when you or we did it, what was your takeaway from that?
It's always a thing of communication. It's if you do it right, if you do it properly,
yeah.
If you announce it early, if you give the people a good grace time, if you give them an alternative what they can do next, then it's generally okay. But even in some other stuff where we did it in a momentum reaction, yeah, there will be a little shitstorm, but you're going to survive. Eventually, if the feature is not contributing to your product, then you will survive. And you can do it in a very graceful way. You could just in the first place, you could remove links from UI that link to that thing, and just leave all the code there. And if the feature has been removed visually, eventually remove the code and get some more headspace.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, maybe one important takeaway for me is that today the product is more than what we consider always the core product. Let's say the thing that brings a lot of value to the end user. Rather than that, it's much more. Like for example, your HR is working with an HR tool, and this again kind of builds into your platform. So you have this job section. You have documentation. So there is like the sales team needs to, like in the B2B case, the sales team needs to be able to form the experience for people that are requesting your price, etc. Like it's super important that everyone, the major stakeholders in your team, they have a good product knowledge. That it's not like, we have one product owner and he's gonna do everything. It's better if everyone is sort of educated on decision making for your product. Because in the end, everyone plays into it. So you really need to have this holistic view, and you need to really raise the bar in your own team to have like also a really good experience across the different domains and touchstones in your own product, I guess.
Yeah. I could add that it's always also good to put, even if the developers sometimes get in touch with the customer, it shouldn't happen too often, but sometimes it's good to give them some empathy. Like it's not the abstract client who gives me somewhat money, but like he's a human person, and if I can improve his way of doing things, everything gets better.
Yeah. So we have a little time left, so let's switch to the horizontal expansion, which is quite like en vogue right now. Like every product tries to quickly, start adding new products. Every company starts to add new products to their product line. So we see lots of platform thinking in several spaces, and something that I see is, for example, there is no ideal time to really expand it. For example, we are more like a bootstrap company. We don't have an investor on board. Like if I have like a bootstrap company, we try to aim for the low-hanging fruits first, because simply it's less risk, it's cheaper, it's feasible to get there. So the example of actually what we have built is quite interesting here. So first we started with a photo editor. So this is more like a convenience thing for other products and services. Mostly it's something that is not super necessary, but nice to have. So many users request it, but in the end, you can live without it. So, and for us, it was easier to ship this first. So we started with an HTML5 editor, added iOS and mobile later, but this is like our product package here. Later on, 2 years later, we actually added a video editor SDK, and we followed a very like MVP approach. Like someone in my team would say, an embarrassing product. Actually, we shipped an embarrassing product because it was basically a copy of the photo editor with simply like 2 edit features, with like video support and the trimming feature. But we realized that there was a lot of interest in that product, and 2 years later it became our actually flagship product. In photo editor and video editor became more important, and obviously video is becoming a super big topic. It is also like more to the core of the value chain for our end users, or for like the products that are using it. And now we have added another like really important milestone, which is the CE SDK, which is like a new product for itself, much broader, something we would have never be able to build in the beginning, because we had to get the knowledge from the photo editor first to build this. And this is a much more, let's say, prime time product, and something where we already feel like we can capture much bigger deal with it. It's really essential to many customers. Because they can simply even, this tool can be used to expand into new products. So we're actually helping other companies to get there. And I think we also have like similar experience with Mein Praktikum, right?
Yes, like in the beginning it was Mein Praktikum, and we were actually consolidating our sales when there was always the request, at the customers, they were like asking, like, it's super cool that you have that products to get like internships in a university level, but the real problem that we actually have in Germany, we have that apprenticeship model where you don't study in Bachelor of Science, but you do like a 2 or 3 year apprenticeship in a company, and like, if I hear it's for the 6th time that people really need a platform to get apprenticeships, to get more information, to do that, then actually going to build it. And this was actually the bigger platform. Eventually, it made 90% of all the sales, and from there on, we also kept like branched out to trainee, like, which is also it's university level, but it's if you finish with university, you're gonna stay at the company for a year and move through different departments. It was like Carista, which is career start, and my university, meine Universität, to figure out universities. And yeah, it totally makes sense. But could you give me some insight? Like how long was the time frame from photo editor to creative SDK to get that? Because sometimes you're a product owner, you're not a feature creep.
Yeah. It took us 5 years, so it's quite a time still. But I feel like compared to other companies, we are more early with branching out and adding new products. But simply this really comes together with our vision, and we always had this plan. So I think there is no way in really having a common wisdom for when to add your next product. It really is a highly strategic decision, and in our case, we didn't have to go for the most lucrative market first because it was just not feasible in the beginning, and so it was for us the good way to go. But others would be probably in a different position. So yeah, it's something I think kind of more rocket science at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Maybe my general rule of thumb would be to saturate your market first. Try to stick as long with one feature or one part of your product as you can, that you understand all edges of your product, all edges of the market, how to tackle them, how to talk to them. And when you have the feeling there's no area unexplored, then you can expand like horizontally. But it's easier said than done. Maybe we should come to the Q&A. Like I have got some questions. Maybe we figure out some more. Like one of the questions here coming from an anonymous user is like, how do you find your way out of customization driven of adding of paid features? Long sentence. So how do you find your way out of customization? This is how it boils down.
I mean, you look into your numbers. You look into how great are your sales at this moment in a more automated fashion. And then, you start saying no. And you observe what happens. Sometimes customers even just come, even if you're not going to build something for them, like if you're not going to add something for them. It's also really important that you're making smart deals, so never make something exclusive for one customer so you cannot use this feature again. But just try to, reason with them and say, you have to pay for it, but it's going to be part of this main product. So this makes it a little easier to kind of still bake it into your product roadmap. But in the end, it's really about making the step and saying no, even if it feels like I shouldn't do it. There's like lucrative deals. It's still good revenue you can make with it. But in the end, this is not what you want to achieve in your long term. You want to have recurring revenue. You don't want others to dictate your roadmap in a way that you're really not flexible anymore. And so we have started doing that. We started saying no, and we're happy with that decision.
Mm-hmm. I would like to add some things. Like one of the most important thing is like, what complexity will this feature add to my product? If I look at it from let's start from a UI complexity. If there's a new button which leads me somewhere, that might be okay. But maybe I will need a new sidebar with a lot of icons in it and a lot of stuff is going on. And you might make that one customer happy, but you will confuse new customers who will say like, oh, your product looks like a NASA cockpit. I don't want to do it. I don't want to use it. And this is something where it gets complicated. Another option could be look at the code complexity that you got to introduce. Like if there's something which is like really technical challenging and you have to rewrite a lot of your stuff internally, yeah, you don't want to do it in the first place. And be harder at saying no. And if you want to do it, maybe do it in an interleaved mode. I always felt it quite good while developing, saying there are times in the year that are for like iterating products and maybe adding new features, and there are like times in the year where you're gonna make your stuff where you really polish your product and make it perfect, and just focus on what is there instead of creating new things.
Yeah, and maybe just one thing to add is still really important. Like, it always depends on the nature of your business. So we're B2B, we're building developer tools. So in the end, there is not this thing that it can be too much, because we really want to provide this flexibility for the developer to, shape things his way. And we just really want to have a little bit more structure in the type of deals that we do. So sometimes, for example, when we do a new product, so with the video editor and with the creative editor, we had partners that we worked side by side with. Like, we asked them and said, we're going to build this thing, you need it. We're going to look a little bit more into your requirements because it matters to us, because we don't want to work into the dark. We really want to have like this use case that we feel is very common. And so there is this win-win situation. But again, you have to be careful about the commitments that you want to do, and it shouldn't be just one single customer. It should be more than that. Just at least have some really good market insights that drive your product building.
Okay, there's another question. How can we know if there are too many features, and when is the time when we should remove something?
Well, again, you look at your numbers. If you're not making revenue, it means you have worked into the wrong direction. It's really important that things. When you build a feature, you have a hypothesis. Like, you say, I built this because because we want to achieve this and that, and you have to keep track of that. To be honest, like, this is difficult also for us. Like, we've done things, where I would say I didn't follow my own advice right now. But this is the discipline that you need to have. You need to really understand, what does this feature do, and if it doesn't do it, well, then you need to reconsider, what's going wrong. And if generally your product is not working, and you keep adding feature after feature, you're in that loop. You're like, this feature will eventually, that will do the trick, and that will probably not do the trick. So you need to really step back and really understand what's going on here. And so also there's also this thing that sometimes happens when you're releasing a feature. You'll have a spike, and then the spike flattens out, and nothing really happened. It hasn't really moved your product, and you have to be careful about that as well. If it's just a spike, it didn't really do well. So yeah.
People were just trying it out. It's like, my litmus test for this is also, you tend to spend a lot of time with your power customers, who like, you're using your product a lot, but always find someone who has never seen your product and ask him to use it. And you will learn a lot on this way. You will learn that he's like, what is this for? What is this doing? Why is that so complicated? And you will say, like, because we added that feature 3 months ago, and now everything is complicated. Yeah. And it gives you sometimes look with a fresh look and listen closely, and maybe say, okay, this does not make sense. So it's the last 10 seconds come up. Arai, thanks a lot for giving it so much insights in Imagely. And if you need a photo editor or video SDK for your startup, like, just hit him up on Twitter, or like, he's gonna be around. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.